I thought my biggest problem that weekend was figuring out how to get the ancient, temperamental septic system at our family's lake house to behave for the new summer tenants. I unlocked the door, mentally running through my plumbing checklist, and was hit with a wall of sound. Not a gurgling pipe, but Frank Sinatra crooning about Chicago. In the middle of my living room, doing a clumsy box step with a blonde half his age, was my brother-in-law, David. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was supposed to be at a dental conference in Phoenix, a trip my sister Carol had been complaining about for weeks. And the blonde? She most certainly was not the hygienist he'd occasionally mention. The look on his face when he saw me, a mixture of cheap champagne and pure, unadulterated panic, was the moment my quiet, predictable life caught fire. If you're ready for this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this a like so you don't miss the updates. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It's always lovely to see where everyone is. Now, let me back up a little and paint the full picture for you. My name is Susan. I'm 64, and I've been a widow for just over a decade. My late husband, Robert, and I bought this little cottage on Lake Haven 30 years ago. It's nothing fancy, a classic A-frame with a big screened-in porch and a dock that needs a few new boards every spring. It was our sanctuary, the place we raised our two kids, Mark and Jenny, over long, sticky summers filled with swimming, cookouts, and the buzz of mosquitoes at dusk. After Robert passed, the house became my project. I poured my grief into sanding floors and picking out new curtains, keeping his memory alive in the scent of pine cleaner and freshly mown grass. My sister Carol and her husband David live about 2 hours away. Carol is my younger sister by 5 years, and we've always been, well, sisters. We love each other fiercely, but we are cut from entirely different cloths. I was the bookish one who went into library science. She was the social butterfly who married a dentist and became the queen of her suburban kingdom. David, her husband of nearly 40 years, was always fine. You know the type. Perfectly pleasant, a little bit boring. He had a successful practice, played golf on Saturdays, and always remembered my birthday. He was, by all accounts, a steady, reliable man who adored my sister. Or so I thought. The lake house was officially mine, but I'd always been generous with it. I let my kids and their families use it whenever they wanted, and of course Carol and David were always welcome. This particular year, though, my property taxes had shot up something fierce, and my pension wasn't stretching as far as it used to. After a lot of hand-wringing, I decided to rent the place out for the first time just for July and August to a lovely family from the city. The money would give me some breathing room. I'd told everyone in the family months in advance that the house was off limits for the summer season. Carol had been a little pouty about it. She'd pictured herself sipping Chardonnay on the dock in July. But she understood. Or again, so I thought. I drove up that Friday morning with a car full of fresh linens, cleaning supplies, and a new coffee maker for the renters who were scheduled to arrive the next day. The 2-hour drive from my home in the suburbs was peaceful. I listened to a podcast about historical mysteries and felt a sense of purpose. This was a new chapter. Susan, the proprietor. The long gravel driveway crunched under my tires as I pulled up to the cottage. The first thing I noticed was David's car, a shiny silver Lexus he was ridiculously proud of, parked behind a cluster of pine trees, clearly meant to be hidden from the main path. That was the first red flag. It was so out of place. Why would he be here? And why would he hide his car? My mind immediately went to a benign explanation. Maybe he'd decided to surprise me and help me get the place ready. Silly, I know. David hadn't voluntarily lifted a finger to help with manual labor since Carter was in office. I grabbed my purse and the keys, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. The air was thick with the scent of honeysuckle and lake water, a smell that usually brought me comfort. Today it felt tainted. As I got closer to the house, I could hear the music. Old Blue Eyes. David loved him, a fact Carol lamented every time they were in the car together. "If I have to listen to my way one more time, Susan, I'm going to drive us both into a ditch," she'd say.
I put my key in the lock. The deadbolt was already unlocked. Red flag number 2. I never left it unlocked. I pushed the door open, my sensible Clark squeaking softly on the pine floor, and there they were. The music swelled as David twirled his partner, a woman with a cascade of bleached blonde hair, dressed in a short pink sundress that was clearly more suited for a 20-something. David, bless his heart, had all the rhythm of a refrigerator falling down a flight of stairs. They were both holding flutes of what looked like champagne. An empty bottle of Corbel, not even the good stuff, sat on my coffee table next to a half-eaten bag of Tostitos. My coffee table. My Tostitos. He looked up mid-twirl, a goofy champagne-fueled grin on his face. The grin vanished the second he saw me. It was like watching a cartoon character run off a cliff. His face just hung there in midair for a second before pure, abject terror took over. His glasses slipped down his nose. The blonde, whose name I would later learn was Tiffany, let out a little squeak and stumbled back, her pink sundress suddenly looking very, very flimsy. The music was still playing. My kind of town, Chicago is. Silence descended, thick and suffocating, broken only by Sinatra. For a solid 30 seconds, the three of us were frozen in a bizarre tableau. Me, the 64-year-old widow clutching my purse like a shield. Him, the respected suburban dentist looking like a teenager caught with a beer. And her, the 20-something cliché, wide-eyed and clutching a champagne flute. David was the first to move. He cleared his throat, a sound like gravel in a blender. "Susan, what are you doing here?" Such a stupid question. It was my house. What was he doing here? But my voice seemed to have taken a vacation. I just stared, my brain trying to process the scene. The rumpled bed in the loft, visible from the living room. The woman's purse, a monstrosity of fake leather and gold chains, thrown on the armchair Robert and I had picked out at an antique fair. The 2 used wine glasses next to my sink. This wasn't a quick afternoon mistake. They had been here for a while. They had made themselves at home. I finally managed, my voice a croak. "The renters are coming tomorrow, David. I told everyone." He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed, thinning gray hair. His face was blotchy and red. "Oh, right, the renters. Gosh, that completely slipped my mind. We were just passing through. Thought we'd stop and check on the place." He gestured vaguely at Tiffany. "This is Tammy, a colleague from the conference." Tammy? I was pretty sure the squeak she had let out had been more of a Tiffany, and colleague, unless her area of expertise was wearing inappropriate for her age sundresses and dancing badly to Sinatra. I doubt it. She gave a little wave that was more like a twitch. He knew I wasn't buying it. I have what my kids call a librarian face. It's calm, it's quiet, but it can radiate disapproval from 50 yards. And right then, my librarian face was a DEFCON 1. And just when he thought he had me backed into a corner, he forgot who he was dealing with. Stick with me, because you'll want to see how this plays out. I took a deep breath. The scent of cheap champagne and betrayal filled my lungs. I asked him, "The Phoenix Conference, David? I mentioned that your sister mentioned it to me. She said she was sad that you'd be missing your anniversary." Their anniversary was that Saturday, tomorrow, a milestone, 40 years. I suddenly felt sick to my stomach, a wave of hot, angry nausea washing over me for my sister. 40 years of marriage, and here he was doing a clumsy mambo with Tammy in my living room. David's face paled. He'd forgotten I would know that. He looked from me to Tiffany, and a flicker of something truly ugly crossed his face. Not just panic, but annoyance. He was annoyed that I had shown up, that I was ruining his fun. That was the moment something inside me snapped. It was no longer just shock. It was cold, hard fury, the kind that settles deep in your bones and clarifies everything. He wasn't just cheating on my sister. He was doing it in my house, my sanctuary, Robert's house. He was disrespecting me, my home, my husband's memory, and his 40-decade marriage to my sister, all in one fell swoop.
Well, I said, finding my voice at last. It was calm, level, far calmer than I felt. Since the renters are arriving at noon tomorrow, you and your colleague will need to be gone, and you'll need to clean up. I surveyed the scene with a deliberately critical eye. Wash the sheets, the towels, clean the glasses. And for heaven's sake, David, take your cheap champagne and your Tostitos with you. Tiffany looked horrified, as if I'd just asked her to scrub a latrine. David, however, looked almost relieved. He thought this was it. He thought I was just going to tell him to scram and maybe give him the silent treatment for a few months. He thought his little secret was safe with me, that I would swallow this enormous, disgusting pill for the sake of keeping the peace. Oh, you have no idea how wrong he was. I watched him start to nod, a compliant, "Yes, of course, Susan," forming on his lips. He thought he was getting off easy. He didn't know that my mind was already spinning, not with a plan for quiet family diplomacy, but with a blueprint for absolute, devastating, and perfectly legal revenge. He started to usher Tiffany towards the door, whispering something to her. I stood my ground, not moving from the entryway. "One more thing, David," I said. He stopped, his back to me. "I believe you left your conference name tag on the bedside table." He froze. There was, of course, no name tag, but the way his shoulders tensed, the way his breath hitched, that was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't just a dalliance. This was a whole other life, and I had just stumbled right into the middle of it. David flinched as if I'd struck him. He slowly turned around, and for a second I thought he might actually try to argue, but he just looked defeated. The swagger he'd had dancing with his 20-something was gone, replaced by the pasty, tired look of a man who'd just seen his two neat, separate worlds collide with the force of a freight train. Without another word, he scurried into the loft bedroom. Tiffany, who had been frozen by the door this whole time, looked at me with a mixture of fear and contempt. She clearly thought I was just some nosy old battle axe ruining her romantic getaway. She had no idea. A minute later, David came back down, empty-handed, of course. His face was a mask of strained politeness. "All clear," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. He grabbed Tiffany's elbow a little too forcefully and steered her out the door. I stepped aside, watching as he hustled her towards his silver Lexus. He didn't even open the car door for her. The spell was broken. She was no longer a beautiful escape. She was a complication, and he couldn't get her out of my sight fast enough. The Lexus crunched down the gravel drive and was gone, leaving only silence and the faint, lingering smell of her cheap perfume. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the birds chirping and the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. Sounds that had always brought me peace. Now they felt mocking. Finally, I closed the door, slid the deadbolt firmly into place, and surveyed the disaster he'd left behind. It wasn't just messy, it was disrespectful. A greasy smear on my new slip covers, a water ring on the antique end table Robert had refinished himself. They had treated my home, our home, like a cheap motel room. I started to clean. And with every swipe of the sponge, every wad of trash I shoved into the garbage bag, my anger became colder, harder, and more focused. I found a tube of glossy pink lipstick under a couch cushion. In the bathroom, a ridiculously expensive bottle of men's cologne I knew for a fact David didn't wear. A gift for him, perhaps, or from him to her, to keep at their little love nest. I stripped the bed in the loft, bundling the sheets he and that girl had used, and held them with 2 fingers as if they were radioactive, dumping them straight into the outdoor trash can. I'd buy new ones. I would burn them if I could. I opened the windows wide to air the place out, to chase the ghosts of them away with fresh lake air. As I was wiping down the kitchen counters, I saw his briefcase. The idiot! In his frantic rush to get Tiffany out of there before I could say another word, he had left his briefcase sitting on one of the kitchen chairs, partially tucked under the table. My heart started to beat a little faster. For a moment, I considered just leaving it, calling him and telling him to come back and get it. That would be the proper, polite thing to do. But I was long past the point of being proper and polite. David had forfeited that right when he put his hands on another woman and danced with her on my living room floor. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the briefcase and set it on the table. It was one of those expensive leather ones with a combination lock, a pathetic attempt at hiding his secrets. I thought for a moment, what would the combination be? His birthday? Anniversary? Too obvious. Then it hit me. Carol had complained for years that he used the same code for everything, thinking it was clever. Their first address, 1214, for 1214 Sycamore Street. I knelt down, clicked the small brass dials, and the latches popped open with a satisfying snick. He thought a messy weekend was his only crime. He had no idea he'd just handed me the key to unlocking his entire secret life. And believe me, I was about to turn that key. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect. Files for his dental practice, a few professional journals, a pack of mints. But underneath it all, there was a slim manila folder with no label. My breath caught in my throat. I lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. Inside wasn't a collection of love letters or illicit photos. It was worse. It was paperwork. Reams of it. Bank statements from an account I didn't recognize, under his name only. Credit card bills filled with charges for jewelry stores, high-end restaurants in a city 100 miles away, and lingerie boutiques. He was funding an entire second life. And then I found the centerpiece. Tucked into a crisp, clear plastic sleeve was a preliminary deed for a condominium, a 2-bedroom ocean view unit in Destin, Florida. The closing date was 3 weeks away, and the names on the deed were David Miller and Tiffany Cole. Tiffany. I knew it wasn't Tammy. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't a fling. This was an exit plan. He was siphoning off marital assets, money he had earned while my sister raised their children and ran their home, and using it to build a new life with a woman half his age. 40 years. 40 years of shared Christmases, of nursing sick kids, of family vacations and financial planning and growing old together, and he was preparing to throw it all away and leave Carol with the ashes? I felt a surge of rage, so pure and so potent it almost made me dizzy. Oh no. No, he would not. Not on my watch. I pulled out my cell phone, my hands shaking with a mixture of fury and adrenaline. I scrolled past my sister's number. I couldn't call her. Not yet. Hearing my voice, she would know in a second that something was terribly wrong, and I couldn't decimate her world over the phone without a plan. I needed advice. I needed a strategy. I needed someone who thought like he did, coldly, legally, and strategically. I dialed my son, Mark. Mark is a good boy, a 40-year-old with my late husband's calm demeanor and, thankfully, a much sharper legal mind than either of us ever possessed. He's a partner at a big law firm downtown, specializing in financial litigation. When he answered, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mark, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't interrupt, I said, my voice low and urgent. Mom, are you okay? You're at the lake house, right? I'm fine. I'm at the lake house, and I found your Uncle David here with another woman." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Then, "He what?" I quickly laid out the entire sordid story, from Sinatra to the hasty exit to the briefcase. When I got to the part about the condo deed in Destin, Mark let out a long, slow whistle. "Oh, Mom, that's bad. That's burn it all down bad." "That's the idea," I said grimly. "Mark, he's stealing from her, from my sister. He's got secret bank accounts, credit cards. He's about to buy a condo with his girlfriend using what I have to assume is their money. Their 40th anniversary is tomorrow. He's planning on leaving her. I know it." "Okay, Mom. Okay. Calm down," he said, his lawyer brain kicking into high gear. "You did the absolute right thing by calling me first. Do not call Aunt Carol. Do not call David. Do not let him know you have the briefcase. Did he call you yet looking for it?" "No," I said, glancing at my phone. "Not yet, but he will. When he does, you play dumb. You haven't seen it. Let him sweat. Now, listen. The papers you found are a smoking gun. This isn't just an affair anymore. It's what's called dissipation of marital assets. He's actively hiding and spending money that legally belongs to both of them. This gives Aunt Carol massive leverage in a divorce proceeding." The word divorce hung in the air. It sounded so brutal, so final. But there was no other path. I knew that now. So what do I do? This was no longer just about a cheating husband. This was about grand larceny of a life. And I was about to become the world's most unlikely forensic accountant. He was about to get exactly what he deserved, and I had a front row seat. "Don't go anywhere." "You need to become a copying machine," Mark instructed, his voice crisp and clear. "Take pictures of every single page in that folder with your phone, every bank statement, every credit card bill, every page of that condo agreement. Make sure the pictures are clear and legible. Then email them to my private address. I want a digital paper trail started right now. We have to assume he's going to try to destroy this evidence as soon as he realizes it's missing." "Okay," I said, pulling the documents out and laying them flat on the kitchen table. "Then," he continued, "you put everything back in the briefcase, exactly as you found it. Exactly. Lock it, and then you hide it. Hide it somewhere he would never, ever think to look. Not in your car, not in the house. Is the old boat shed still there?" "Yes, it's a wreck, but it's there." "Perfect. Put it in there, under a pile of old tarps and fishing nets. Let it get a little dirty. Let it look like it's been there forever." He paused. "And then, Mom, then we let him panic. And while he's panicking, I'm going to find the best, most ruthless divorce attorney in their county. We're not just going to let him leave. We are going to ensure that Aunt Carol gets every single penny she is entitled to, and then some for this stunt. We're going to take him to the cleaners." A slow smile spread across my face for the first time that day. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was a deeply satisfied one. Justice. That's what this was about. David thought he held all the cards. He was about to find out his entire hand was a bluff. I spent the next hour meticulously photographing every single piece of paper, my hands steady now, my purpose clear. Each flash of the camera felt like a small victory, a nail in the coffin of his deceit. I sent them off to Mark, and then I walked out to the musty old boat shed, pried open the creaking door, and buried that briefcase under a mountain of forgotten boating equipment and the ghosts of summers past. When I walked back into my house, it already smelled a little cleaner. Just as I was putting the last of the fresh towels in the bathroom, my phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed a picture of David and Carol, beaming from last year's 4th of July picnic. The hypocrisy of it almost made me laugh. I let it ring 4 times before answering, just to let his anxiety build. I took a deep, steadying breath and activated my slightly dotty, harmless Susan persona. "Hello?" I said, my voice intentionally a little vague. "David, I'm so sorry about
earlier. I don't know what to say. Yes, well, it was certainly a surprise, I said, keeping my tone flat. Listen, I'm already on the road, halfway to Phoenix. A bald-faced lie. I knew he was probably circling the lake 5 miles away, sweating bullets. And I think in my rush to leave, I might have left my briefcase. You haven't seen it, have you? A brown leather one. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I pictured him gripping his steering wheel, his knuckles white. A briefcase? Gosh, David, no, I don't think so. I've been cleaning up, getting the place ready. Where did you last have it? I think it was in the kitchen, by the table. He was trying to sound so casual, but a note of desperation was creeping in. Could you just take a quick look? It's really important. It has all my presentation materials for the conference. I walked from the kitchen to the living room, making my footsteps deliberately audible over the phone. Nope, not seeing anything here, David. Just the bag of trash you left, which I'm about to take out. It was a petty jab, but it felt good. Are you sure you brought it inside? Maybe you left it in your car. No, I had it inside, he snapped, his politeness finally cracking. He caught himself and reined it back in. I'm positive. It has to be there. Could you please check again? Maybe it got kicked under something. Honestly, David, the renters are going to be here in a few hours, and I still have a lot to do. I did a full sweep of the place when you and your friend left. If it were here, I would have seen it.
He was silent for a moment. I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding, calculating, panicking. What was in that briefcase? He knew. Did he think I knew? He was testing the waters. Well, if you do happen to stumble across it, please just put it somewhere safe for me. I'll have to figure something out when I get back next week. Don't want Carol to worry that I've lost it, he added. The mention of my sister's name was the final straw. He was using her as a shield. I will certainly do that, I said, my voice dripping with an icy sweetness that I hoped he'd be thinking about for the next several 100 miles. I hung up before he could say another word. He thought he was just looking for a briefcase. He had no idea he was already a defendant in a case that had been tried and won in my mind. And the evidence? It was safe and sound, collecting dust under a 1970s-era life preserver. The next step was the hardest one, telling my sister her life was a lie. The rental family arrived right on time, a cheerful couple with 2 young kids who were vibrating with excitement about spending a summer on the lake. Seeing their happy, uncomplicated faces was a strange and painful contrast to the ugliness I was dealing with. I gave them the tour, showed them how to jiggle the handle on the toilet in the guest bathroom, and pointed them toward the best local spot for ice cream. As they thanked me, handing over the second half of the security deposit, I felt a pang of nostalgia for that kind of simple joy. I hoped Carol would get to feel that again someday. With the rentals settled, there was nothing left for me to do at the lake. I got in my car and started the 2-hour drive back, but I didn't go home. I went straight to Carol's. Every mile that passed felt like a tick on a time bomb. I ran the conversation over and over in my head, but there was no good way to say it. There was no gentle way to detonate a person's life. I pulled into her immaculate circular driveway lined with perfectly pruned rose bushes. Her house, a sprawling 2-story colonial, always looked like something out of a magazine. It was her masterpiece, a testament to her life's work as a wife and mother. I rang the bell, and she answered with a bright smile, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. "Susan, what a nice surprise. Come in, come in. I was just whipping up some meringue for a lemon pie for your anniversary dinner tomorrow," she chirped, full of domestic bliss. And my heart just broke. The perfect wife, celebrating 40 years, making a lemon meringue pie for a man who was buying a condo with his mistress. The scene was so cruelly ironic, it felt like something out of a dark comedy.
Carol, can we sit down? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. Her smile faltered. She knew my "we need to talk" tone. Of course. Is everything all right? You look pale. She led me into her kitchen, a gleaming expanse of white granite and stainless steel. She fussed over me, trying to get me a glass of water, a cup of tea. No, sit down, I said gently, guiding her to one of the plush chairs at the kitchen island. I sat across from her. There was no way to sugarcoat it. I went to the lake house this morning to get it ready for the renters. I paused, gathering my strength. David was there. Carol looked confused. David, but he's in Phoenix. He called me from the airport this morning. The ease with which the lies flowed from him was sickening. He must have flown out from a closer airport and decided to swing by. She was trying to make it make sense, her mind working to smooth over an incongruity. No, sweetie, he wasn't on his way to the airport. I reached across the island to take her hand. He wasn't alone. That was the moment she understood. I saw it in her eyes. The confusion melted away, replaced with a flicker of fear, then dawning horror. Her grip on my hand tightened. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth fell open slightly. "What do you mean?" she whispered, though she already knew. I didn't give her the ugly details of the dancing and the champagne. That felt unnecessarily cruel. I just gave her the facts, clean and sharp like a surgeon's scalpel. He was there with a young woman. It was clear they had been staying there. When I confronted him, he lied and said she was a colleague before they left in a hurry.
Carol pulled her hand away and wrapped her arms around herself as if a sudden chill had swept through her perfect, climate-controlled kitchen. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, there has to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. David, he wouldn't." But her voice was hollow. For 40 years, she had built her world on the foundation of that man's loyalty, and she could feel that foundation turning to sand beneath her feet. "Carol, there's more," I said softly, my heart aching for what I was about to do. He left his briefcase behind. I looked inside. Seeing my sister crumble was the hardest thing I've ever done, but every tear she shed hardened my resolve. David wanted a war. He was about to get one, and he was fighting an army he didn't even see coming. Don't go anywhere, because the real battle is just beginning. I pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I showed her the pictures. I started with the credit card statements, names of restaurants she'd never been to, hotels in cities he had no reason to visit for work. I showed her the bank statements for an account she never knew existed, with huge sums of money being moved around. Her face was a stony mask of disbelief. She stared at the screen, her eyes tracing the numbers but not truly comprehending the scale of the betrayal. Then I showed her the last picture, the deed for the condo in Destin, with his name and Tiffany Cole's. A sound escaped her throat, a raw, wounded noise that I will never forget as long as I live. She pushed the phone away as if it had burned her. The first tear fell, then another, then a flood. The perfect facade of her perfect life dissolved into gasping sobs. She slid off the high kitchen chair and onto the floor, curling into a ball on her pristine white tile, and she wept. She wept for her 40 years, for her stolen future, for the man she thought she knew, for the humiliation. I went down on the floor with her, wrapping my arms around my little sister's shaking shoulders. I didn't say it's going to be okay, because it wasn't, not for a long time. I just held her and let her cry, her tears soaking the front of my shirt. The bowl of sweet, fluffy meringue for the anniversary pie sat on the counter above us, a monument to a marriage that was already dead. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. When her sobs finally subsided into shuddering breaths, she looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy, but with a new, hard glint in them. The butterfly was gone. In her place was a woman forged in the fire of betrayal. "That monster," she whispered, her voice thick with a rage that was eclipsing her grief. He was going to just leave me? With nothing? No, I said, my voice firm. He's not. I called Mark. Her eyes widened. The mention of her nephew, the lawyer, was like a lifeline. What did he say? He said we're going to fight. He said this isn't just cheating. It's financial fraud. He's going to find you the best divorce attorney in the state. He has the evidence. We have all of it. He has no idea what's coming. Right on cue, my phone rang again. It was Mark. I put him on speaker. Mom, Aunt Carol, are you together? He asked, his voice all business. Yes, Mark, we are, I replied. Carol let out a watery sniffle next to me. Good. Aunt Carol, I'm so sorry. So unbelievably sorry this is happening, but I need you to be strong. I've made a call. Her name is Eleanor Vance. They call her the shark in the sensible skirt. She's the best, and she specializes in cases like this, where one spouse tries to hide assets. She's cleared her schedule. She can meet with you both, Monday morning, 10 a.m. Carol took a shuddering breath and pushed herself up to a sitting position, leaning against the kitchen island. She looked at me, then at the phone. Okay, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Okay, Mark. Monday morning. We'll be there. The war had begun. That weekend was the longest of our lives. David called Carol's phone a few times from his conference, leaving cheerful, oblivious messages about how much he missed her and how he couldn't wait to celebrate their anniversary when he got back. Each voicemail was a masterpiece of deceit, and with each one, Carol's resolve hardened. She played them for me on speakerphone, her face a grim, determined mask. She didn't cry anymore. The shock had worn off, replaced by a glacial fury that was terrifying and beautiful to behold. The hurt was still there, of course, bubbling just beneath the surface, but she had channeled it into a singular focus: justice.
We spent the weekend at her house, boxing up 40 years of David. She was methodical, efficient, like a CEO managing a hostile takeover. Every picture of him was taken down from the walls. Every piece of his clothing was packed into garbage bags for donation. Every golf trophy he'd ever proudly displayed was wrapped in newspaper and put in a box labeled garage. The lemon meringue pie she had made with such love was unceremoniously dumped in the trash. It was a cleansing, a brutal and necessary exorcism of his presence from her life and her home. I was her silent partner, her assistant in this demolition. I made coffee, I taped up boxes, and I listened. By Monday morning, she looked like a different woman. She had on a sharp navy blue suit I had never seen before. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense chignon, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. There were still dark circles under her eyes, but she held her head high as we walked into the imposing marble lobby of Eleanor Vance's law firm. She was no longer a victim. She was a client, a warrior. Eleanor Vance was a woman in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, commanding presence that filled the room. She didn't waste time with platitudes or syrupy condolences. She shook Carol's hand firmly, looked her directly in the eye, and said, "Tell me everything." For the next 2 hours, Carol and I laid it all out. The 40 years of marriage, David's controlling nature with their finances, my discovery at the lake house, and the treasure trove of documents from his briefcase. She listened, her face impassive, occasionally taking notes on a long yellow legal pad. When we finished, she tapped her pen on the pad a few times, a thoughtful, predatory glint in her eyes. "This is egregious," she said, her voice a low purr that sent a shiver down my spine. "But it is also, from a legal perspective, a gift. Your husband has been sloppy, arrogant, and foolish, and he is about to pay a very steep price for it." She looked at Carol. "Our first move is a restraining order and a court order to freeze all his known assets, personal and business.
He's trying to buy a condo, you say? With Tiffany Cole? She consulted her notes. We will file a lis pendens against that property. It's a notice that it's the subject of a lawsuit, and it will effectively halt the sale. The title will be so clouded, no one will touch it. He's not going anywhere near that condo. Carol nodded, a grim smile touching her lips. He thought he could just disappear. Oh, he'll disappear, all right, but not in the way he planned. We will also subpoena the records for the secret accounts and credit cards you discovered. And we will do a full forensic accounting of his dental practice. Men like David, they rarely just siphon money from their personal accounts. More often than not, the business is their private slush fund. He's likely been skimming cash profits for years. This was bigger than we had even imagined. This wasn't just about an affair. It was about years of systematic criminal-level deception. He wasn't just a cheat. He was a thief. And my sister had been his primary victim. He was about to get a wake-up call he'd never forget. Stick with me, because this is where we turn the tables, and oh, it was so much better than I could have dreamed. Eleanor's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. We would not let David know that we knew. We would let David return from his fake conference, walk into a life that seemed perfectly normal, and then we would drop the hammer. On Thursday, his flight was scheduled to land. On Friday morning, he would be served with divorce papers, the restraining order, and the notice of the asset freeze, all at his office in front of his entire staff. He needs to feel the full financial and social consequences of his actions simultaneously. Public humiliation is a powerful tool. He has built his reputation on being a pillar of the community, the stable family man. We're going to burn that facade to the ground. The next few days were agonizing. Carol went to stay with her son, leaving the pristine, David-free house empty. David came home on Thursday evening, just as planned, calling Carol to tell her he'd landed safely and was on his way. She played the part beautifully, her voice calm and welcoming. "Wonderful, dear. Drive safe. There's a roast in the oven for you." The roast was, of course, imaginary. The house he was driving towards was dark and empty.
We learned later from a neighbor that his car sat in the driveway for over an hour. He must have walked through the empty rooms, seeing the blank spaces on the walls where their life together used to hang, the empty closets, the cold kitchen. The slow, creeping dread must have been unimaginable. He called Carol's phone dozens of times. She never answered. The next morning, Friday at 9:15 a.m., the process server, a large, impassive man who looked like a former linebacker, walked into David Miller Family and Cosmetic Dentistry. David was in the middle of a consultation with a patient about veneers. The server walked right into the room in front of the patient and a dental assistant and said in a booming voice, "David Miller, you've been served." He dropped a stack of papers nearly 3 inches thick on the instrument tray. News travels fast in a small town. The dental assistant texted her friends before the server had even left the parking lot. The patient in the chair, the wife of a local banker, was on the phone to her husband before David could even pick up the first page. Within an hour, it was the only thing the local gossip mill was talking about. His perfect world had been shattered. He tried to call his bank to move money, only to be told his accounts were frozen by court order. He tried to call his credit card companies, but his cards had already been canceled. He tried to call his lawyer, but Eleanor had already sent a notice of representation, blocking him. He was completely, utterly boxed in. That evening, I was at Carol's son's house when the call came. It was David, calling from a blocked number. Carol looked at me, took a deep breath, and answered, putting it on speaker for me and her son to hear. "Carol, what is going on? What have you done?" he shrieked, his voice ragged with panic and fury. "My accounts are frozen. I can't even buy gas. A man came into my office, my business. Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation?" Carol was silent for a long moment. Then she replied, her voice as cold and clear as ice. I believe the term is reaped what you sown, David. As for your reputation, you seem to have handled its destruction all on your own. I just brought it into the light. It's about that woman, isn't it? It was a mistake, Carol. A stupid, meaningless mistake. Was the secret bank account a mistake? Were the secret credit cards a mistake? Was stealing from our retirement savings to buy your girlfriend a 2-bedroom ocean view condo in Destin a mistake, David? There was a stunned, choking silence on the other end of the line. He hadn't realized we knew. He thought this was just about the cheating. He had no idea we had the playbook. He didn't know we'd found his briefcase. How did you... That's a question for my sister, Carol said, a note of triumph in her voice. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm having dinner with my family. My lawyer, Ms. Vance, will be in touch with your lawyer. Don't ever call this number again. And she hung up. I looked at my sister, truly looked at her. The weeks of pain and stress had taken their toll, but she was smiling. A real smile. She was in control. She was no longer David Miller's quiet, compliant wife. She was Carol, the woman who was about to take back her life with interest. He thought he was playing checkers, but he had just run into 2 queens and a chess master, and he was in checkmate. The months that followed were not easy, but they were deeply satisfying. David tried to fight, of course. He hired a lawyer. Not a good one, because all his liquid assets were frozen and he had to borrow money from his brother just to pay the retainer. They tried to argue that I had stolen his briefcase, that the evidence was inadmissible. Eleanor Vance just smiled that shark-like smile of hers and reminded them that he had left it in my house after breaking into it for an illicit tryst. The judge, a stern woman who clearly had no patience for men like David, didn't even blink before allowing every single piece of paper I'd photographed into evidence. The forensic accountants had a field day. It turned out the condo was just the tip of the iceberg. David had been skimming cash from his practice for nearly 5 years, hiding it in offshore accounts to avoid taxes and, more importantly, to keep it from Carol. He'd spent tens of thousands on Tiffany, trips, jewelry, even a leased BMW. Every dollar was a slap in the face to the woman who had ironed his shirts and raised his children for 40 decades.
And just when he thought he could wring a little sympathy out of the court, he forgot who he was dealing with. We didn't just want half, we wanted justice. Stick with me, because the final scorecard is truly something to behold. The settlement conference was the last time we saw him in person. He looked 10 years older. His perfectly dyed hair was showing gray roots, and his expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. He wouldn't meet Carol's eyes. When Eleanor slid the final settlement agreement across the long mahogany table, he barely read it. He just signed. He knew he was beaten. Because of the dissipation of marital assets, the legal term for him spending their money on his mistress, Carol didn't just get half. She got the house, fully paid off. She got 70% of their retirement accounts. She got permanent alimony, garnished directly from his practice's future earnings. As for Tiffany, the minute the accounts were frozen and the leased BMW was repossessed, she vanished. We heard later she'd moved back to the city and was already dating a real estate developer. David had blown up his entire life for a woman who saw him as nothing more than a walking ATM. He ended up having to sell his practice to a large dental conglomerate because the scandal had ruined his local reputation. He now works there as a junior associate, answering to a boss 20 years younger than him. He lives in a gloomy 1-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. His children barely speak to him. He has his freedom, exactly what he wanted, and it's the loneliest freedom imaginable. It's been a year now. Carol and I are back at the lake house for the weekend, just the 2 of us. We're sitting on the dock, drinking the good wine, not Corbel, and watching the sunset. Carol is laughing, really laughing, telling me about a nice man, a retired architect she met at her pottery class. She's radiant. She's free. I often think back to that moment when I walked in on them, the horror of Sinatra playing while my world tilted on its axis. It was the worst moment of my life, but it was also the best thing that could have happened to my sister. It woke her up. It woke us both up. We learned that we are stronger, smarter, and far more resilient than we ever gave ourselves credit for. David learned that you should never, ever underestimate the women you think you've successfully silenced. So, that's my story. It was a long, messy road, but we made it to the other side. I want to know what you all think. If you had walked into your house and found what I did, would you have done the same thing? Let me know in the comments below how you would have handled it. I read every single one.
Your watch to the end. Be click here. You will hear another story from my grandma.